You want curry chawal one day and you want bhendi the next day, and I don't think you can predict what's going to send you to jail. I have an Indian accent, and if you don't understand, just go to work and ask your boss. He's got wrinkles, his lawyer got Botox, and I think with comedy it's very important for someone to tell you that you're shit. Like, you won the Emmy, now write the memoir. And like wake up at 4 a.m. and shove ice up your ass or whatever the heck. There's a nice picture of me next to dirty dishes with an Emmy award. Either the coolest kid in school becomes a comic, or the loser in school becomes a comic. Comedians are failed rock stars.
I'm so excited to invite our guest today. He is a national treasure. He's, of course, an Emmy Award winner. He's a comic, he's a writer, director, actor, all of those things. But really, he is a national treasure. Please put your hands together for the man that you're all here early in the morning on a Sunday for, Veer Das. Thank you, Veer. Always good to see you.
Hey guys, what's up? Hello. No, not my first time in Melbourne. I played Hammer Hall, I think, last year. Hammer Hall? A hall. I played a hall last year, yeah.
Nice. Veer, for very long, we've been trained to think, and I think you'll agree, trained to believe that when the audience in India goes to watch a Bollywood film, goes to watch a Bollywood comedy, what they want is to leave their brains at home.
Yeah.
It's the accepted truth, unfortunately, reflected in the success of so many films that sort of require just that or feed into that. Stand-up requires exactly the opposite, I think. It actually requires you to think. What you do requires one to think. Tell me, how do you sort of resign yourself to these two realities and these two truths when you're writing material for an Indian audience, for specifically an Indian audience?
I think you have to firstly accept that one makes you money and one doesn't make you money. So I do think, you want different things on different days. You want curry chawal one day and you want bhendi the next day. And so I do think the two can peacefully coexist with each other. You can go and see, the comedy with your family, and then you can come and see stand-up. I do believe, though, that the aftertaste of stand-up is stronger than the aftertaste of a Bollywood movie.
That's probably true, yes.
So if you come to a concert, much like you go to a Diljit Dosanjh concert, you go to a Coldplay concert, you all walk out saying, "Arey, I've experienced something with some people and it feels like we were part of something." Yeah. I think it's very rare for a comedy to do that in the theaters.
That's right.
And I think stand-up will do that.
Yeah.
I don't think a comedian is particularly trying to make you think, but I think comedians got into what they were doing because they were thinkers and losers at the same time.
Something to say, right?
And they had something to say. Comedians are failed rock stars.
Okay.
That's really what we are. We wanted applause and we wanted attention, but we didn't have the talent to get it, so we just shat on the people who had the talent, from far away, and got it for ourselves. So I think that's how I reconcile it, saying both of these things can peacefully coexist with each other.
Sure. Veer, you've played you all over the world, really. You've performed everywhere. What are the toughest rooms to crack?
Well, some of them are in India, but they keep getting broken down, and they're not tough to crack for me. For the people who are cracking them, you have to hit multiple times and break the lights and all, but I think it depends. Yeah, like, okay, my filthiest show of the year is for the Rotary Club of Chanakyapuri.
Really?
And it is 65 to 85-year-olds who have left their children at home and their grandchildren at home. And can I cuss on these things? Yeah? Why am I asking the audience? I'll ask. So this old Dadaji, I'm like, "Sir, can I be?" He's like, "Ma," he was like, "Mera pure parivar ghar pe hai, I don't give a shit." So that room can also be, one of the easiest rooms in the world. For me, the toughest room is a room full of advertising people.
Okay.
So
it's corporate gigs.
Corporate guys, but also the creative gurus.
Right.
Always fancy that, I could have done that shit.
Right.
And so those guys are always a tough audience.
Right.
And alpha males.
Right.
Because alpha males sit there very pissed off that you have made their woman laugh more than they have in the last 5 years. So then they must say something and they must heckle. So yeah, those are the two tough ones.
Do you still bomb at all?
Yeah, for sure. Any new show will begin with bombing. Okay. So the journey of how material gets written is you write 5 minutes, then you go to a comedy club, then that will not go well. You listen to that, you rewrite that. By then the comedy club is broken down. But 5 minutes will become 30 good seconds.
Right.
And so when you come and see a 90-minute show, it's been built 30 seconds at a time after bombing, and it's a healthy thing to bomb. It really is good for you, because if you are killing it in front of your crowd constantly, you'll never know what's good.
How frequently do you bomb?
If I'm writing new material, once a week. I'll go in every night, and one night will be truly, truly terrible. And then I will see somebody who's really good. The lovely thing about my profession is, on a given night at a comedy club, the youngest kid is as good as the professional comic who's popped in. It's very democratic.
Right.
It's just jokes. If I do Habitat or the Comedy Cellar in New York on a Monday night, is where Dave Chappelle, Chris Rock, all these guys are popping in to bomb. With new material.
Right.
And that night, I have the upper hand.
Right.
So you'll see somebody who's so good it pisses you off and you go home and rewrite. So I bomb once a week, for sure.
Veer, is there something that you won't joke about? And is that sort of defined by your own conscience and sort of compass? Or is it just because you don't want to go to jail?
Well, firstly, I don't think you can predict what's going to send you to jail.
Okay. True.
It's the distraction that was needed that week.
Right.
And I also think that public life is like a line, and at the front of the line is an ass whooping. A media trial and a public this thing. And if you're going to have public life, you'll be at the front of the line once, and then you join the back of the line and hope there are enough people in front of you कि 2-3 chakkar na lage. I think I wouldn't make fun of someone who didn't have a voice or a platform to counter me back. Right? That's it. So I would never make fun of a sick child.
Right.
Because that child cannot get on a social media platform and let me know how they felt.
Right.
So there used to be this ancient kind of thing of stand-up ki, here are my jokes, if you don't like them, screw you, I'm on to the next city.
Right.
Now the audience has a voice.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you have to honor that voice. But I also think they change the line every year. There are things I could joke about 12 years ago, which I did, which were unevolved, and I can't do today. But it's my job to walk up to the line, and the audience will move it and let me know.
Right. It's actually what you talk about in your new special, don't you?
Yeah.
What is typically areas that you just won't go to because, actually let me rephrase that. Are you self-censoring? This is something I briefly brought up while we were coming here. Because we all know the India that we're living in, we know that everyone is easily offended.
Yeah.
What does that do for creators like yourself, for writers like yourself, who are constantly sort of trying to push the envelope, trying to what are you self-censoring? Are you...
I can't. I'll tell you why. And it's by no means of bravado or any... I have zero bravado. I'm afraid. I'm always afraid. I operate, like a Biscoff cheesecake. The base is biscuit. Mera base fear hai, But two things I tell myself is, one, you can never predict what's going to be the thing that people get offended by or what's going to get you in trouble. I don't think when they shot a song for Pathaan 3 years before the pandemic, they knew one swimsuit would come back to bite them.
Yeah.
5 years later. You can't predict that shit. But also, my audience is very young.
Yeah.
Right? So my audience, 70% of my audience is between the age of 16 and 30. Right? That audience smells bullshit a mile away, right? So, okay, I'll prove it to you. Have you ever seen a massive Bollywood star or celebrity do an interview and you can instantly smell this is an interview? This person is not, if I was up here, Rajiv,
Correct.
instantly you would be in the comment section going, what the fuck is this? This is bullshit, right? So I think this audience can smell an artist not being themselves.
Right.
And not being who they know the artist to be. And I think they need the artist they need to know the artist to support the artist.
Right.
So were I to do a bunch of jokes that were just kind of surface or this thing, I'd lose my audience.
So having said that, Veer, every comic in India that is going out every day and making jokes is risking their life today.
I don't think they're risking their life. I think they're risking their livelihood.
Their freedom, their livelihood.
In India, process is punishment.
It's true.
So if you get 14 FIRs, that is summons and paperwork. And I know a comic who has a bunch of FIRs. He's got wrinkles. His lawyer got Botox. Because his lawyer, the lawyer looks great because he's made so much money off this guy. So lawyer got fillers. But, I think FIRs come with summons and paperwork and notices and legal fees. So if you're a young comic, if you can't afford it, I say don't do it.
Right.
Until you can afford it and then go for it.
Right. I mean, you faced that 3 years ago when Washington.
Yes.
What was the aftermath of that like? Did you ever fall out of love with your job as a result of what came with it? And how do you continue to do what you do?
I mean,
You know the stakes are that high.
I fell in love with my job, to be honest with you. Okay, if I can walk you through it.
Yeah.
I did a video at the Kennedy Center called The Two Indias, right? It got, first 48 hours were great, right? First 48 hours were like, hey, everybody's like, this is damn good, yeah. And then it went viral, and my wife Shivani was here. We had to switch our phones off for about 4 months, and we fought the fees and all of that stuff. And I got really good advice, which was, don't go on the news, don't scream into the void, don't go cry on Oprah,
right.
Type of an interview. Yeah. Just write jokes about it. I had 5 projects that went away.
Yeah.
I had 11 brands that went away. We could not get a job. I remember a clear phone call with my management collective. They're like, listen, all we can do is you have a social media following. So if you want to be an influencer, we can figure that out. But I wrote jokes about it, and the jokes turned into a special, and the special turned into an Emmy Award, and it made me discover that a comedian's job is just, no matter how horrible it is, make it funny, and you'll be okay. And then, we did a world tour, and it sold out in 20 minutes, and suddenly the audience comes in with this deeper connection than they ever had with you before. And you realize, I don't get to be shallow again. Right. Because now they are deeper connected because of that. So in a weird way, it was the worst thing, but also the best thing that ever happened to me.
Because we're at a film festival, I want to talk about films. You were part of 2 films that I think over the years have gone on to become sort of mini cult films, Go Goa Gone and Delhi Belly.
Not Mastizade and Santa Banta.
You brought it up.
Private Limited and Revolver Rani. Guys, you're missing out on the best part of my filmography here. You got to check out these movies. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to.
But especially sort of Delhi Belly and Go Goa Gone.
Yeah.
What are your memories of making those films?
They're not fanciful, but I'll tell you my 2 favorite memories.
Yeah.
Right? In Delhi Belly, we flew to Delhi to shoot it. Air Deccan, I don't know if you remember Air Deccan. It was a bus on a plane, right? And the seats didn't recline. And they gave Imran Khan middle seat between me and Kunal Roy Kapoor. And this is 5 weeks after Jaane Tu.
Right.
So Imran Khan is sitting and this old man comes in. He's like, "Arey, aap to Imran Khan ho?" So he's like, "Haan, main hu." And he's like, आप Air Deccan पे क्या कर रहे हो? And he's like, मैं दिल्ली जा रहा हूँ. And he's like, नहीं. He's like, अगर तुम यहाँ पर हो तो हमारा क्या होगा फिर? And so this old man yelled at Imran Khan for not embracing his success. And then I shared a van with Imran and Kunal, for 6 months. And there was this, with Delhi Belly, we knew we were getting away with it.
Right.
Like we knew even so young that we'll never get to make another one of these
Right.
in our career. And then I got two with Go Goa Gone.
Yeah.
With Go Goa Gone, I was much younger.
Yeah.
So we just got high a lot. In Mauritius, it was great. It was a stoner comedy. We method acted and we just had a really good time in Mauritius here, So, and Raj and DK were early.
Yeah.
So just taking big swings, big risks, and lots of improvisation, which was great.
Have they spoken to you about a sequel? There's been chatter about possibly getting the gang back together.
Yeah, I think if were they to do it, everybody would show up
back.
instantly. But I don't know who would make it right now because 5 different people
That's right,
own
own
that,
rights and
that
it's
franchise,
messy, yeah.
etc. Yeah.
Did you make sort of lifelong friendships in the movies, working in the movies? Sunny Leone and
Sunny is, by the way, the funniest actress I have ever worked with and the most secure actress I've ever worked with. She's just like acutely unaware of how attractive she is, kind of a klutz, and kind of just willing to go anywhere, And I remember we're shooting this critically acclaimed movie called Masti Zade, all right?
5 stars.
5 stars all across the board. By the way, I will say, female lead in double role with a massive paycheck. So that's one bright side to that movie coming out. But यहाँ पर मैं और तुषार कपूर ऐसा जिम जा रहे हैं, push-ups कर रहे हैं. She would eat a cheeseburger, go into the sea, take a swimsuit shot, come out, and then have like ice cream. And we're like, what the fuck, man? Life is unfair. No, I think my world is pretty small, and actors have these fleeting friendships.
Yeah.
I also think outside of like an Imran and Khemo, etc., a lot of actors don't know how to interact with comics.
Yeah.
I think we scare them a little bit
Right.
because we're very truthful.
Yes. Yes.
And a lot of times, I think success in not just our film industry but abroad is making someone else feel like the smartest person in the room.
Yes.
Right? Arey producer saab, aapne jo
Correct.
sona haga hai, you know what I mean? Kind of a, this thing, etc. And I don't think comics know how to do that.
Yes.
So a
Yeah.
lot of times producers and actors are like, yo, this dude tells the truth. So
Yeah.
there's always arm's length.
Right.
But I think when actors reach like that escape velocity, where they're so famous they can parody themselves and they don't give a shit anymore, then they interact with comics really, really well. So I've always find a little arm's length.
Are we allowed to speak about this? You've directed and you're starring in a film that's probably going to be out later this year.
Yeah.
For Amir Khan Productions.
Amir Khan Productions. I've co-directed it with Kavi, who's here tonight as well.
Right. It's called Happy Patel.
It's yes. So I play the title character. Amir Khan produced it, and it's a film called Happy Patel Khatarnak Jasoos.
Okay.
And I play Happy Patel, and Kavi, who's here, who was. Have you seen Love Aajkal? In Love Aajkal, there's me on this side of Saif, blurry in the background, and on the other side of Saif is another guy called Kavi Shastri, and we met in the background of Saif, and we made this movie together. It's a mad spy comedy, and it'll be out soon.
How did that happen?
Post the Emmys, when I had, God was kind, I won, and it felt like things were back on track. I made 5 phone calls, very humbly, to say, please, I'm talented, please work with me, and I'm prepared with ideas. So I didn't want to go in and empty-handed and say, please put me in something, but I'm saying, here's my idea, please work with me. I'm talented and I feel like not enough people have noticed that I'm talented in the acting space, etc.
Right.
So I wrote this movie and then we called Amir and I was like, Amir sir, if you don't produce this, nobody will produce this.
Okay.
And he said, okay, no pressure, come. And so now it to me. And 6 narrations later, we were on board. He's amazing. He really is. You know, his only focus was story.
Right.
What is the story you're trying to tell? Cast will get figured out, budgets will get figured out, and the note he kept saying is, don't compromise on this story.
Nice.
I'm in it for this story.
That's the dream, right? To have a producer like
It's such a dream, and I didn't know how complicated making a movie was.
that. I was going to ask, what was the experience of sort of co-directing this?
I finally realized what a small part of a movie an actor is.
Right.
You know, actors kind of show up like Baba Ka Juice and you know, bhai tu itna hai movie ka. And I fell in love with directing. I think it's what I want to do with this next half of my life. It really, you know, with stand-up,
Right.
your brain is working all the time.
Yeah.
Right? When you're acting on a movie, it works for 15 minutes, an hour, then it's like protein shake, hitting on someone, etc., etc. But the director on the movie is constantly thinking.
Yeah, yeah.
So I loved it. We just really had a good time. Now, I don't know if we've made a good movie or not.
Sure.
Right? You'll tell us. I don't know if this ragtag group of audience that I've gained over these years is enough to make a movie successful.
Hardly ragtag, but sure.
You know, but man, I enjoyed it. I really fell in love with it.
What was it like directing yourself? I mean, literally, like logistically. Did you act and then go running back into the monitor and stuff?
So Kavi is, if my performance sucks,
It's on him.
Kavi Shastri is here tonight, and no, but the process was this. I would usually,
I
if I
suppose what I'm asking is, can one be objective about one's own
for sure,
performance?
and I think with comedy, it's very important for someone to tell you that you're shit.
Right.
You know, so Kavi and I have known each other long enough where Kavi's like, this is shit,
Right.
do something else, right? But I usually shoot what I dream, so I would, and stand up as well, it's usually a dream.
Okay.
So I draw it, so we storyboarded the whole movie.
Nice.
And it would be blown up, signed off by the cameraman, so we knew what we were shooting. Then Kavi and I hired a theatre actor, an understudy who went through all of the workshops with me. So Kavi and I could watch the actor with the cast,
Right.
do the scene, we'd sign off on it, and then I would step in front of camera, and then it was Kavi,
Right.
you know, shepherding all of us. But on a comedy, you know, 2 things were tough to do. Number one, my favorite tone of comedy is where the actors don't know they are in a comedy. You know, so Hangover, such a good example.
Correct.
Jaane Bhi Do Yaro, such a good example where they're just playing straight.
Yeah.
They're playing stakes. You know, that was tough to get everybody on that same tone.
Right.
And then we improvise a lot. So we're like, okay, we've got it. Now try this, try that, try this. You need secure actors to go with you left, right, left, right.
Right.
You know.
You know, Veer, I think this is true of funny people and comic actors across the world. There is this sort of validation that they seek, or the range that they want to show outside of comedy. At some point, there comes a time when you want to say, well, you know, I can be a serious actor.
For sure.
And we've seen that with all the great actors. I mean, you've seen that with Adam Sandler, and you've seen that with Seth Rogen and everyone. Hasmukh was something in that direction, although it was a dark comedy, wasn't it? It was a serial killer.
I feel like, you know, Hasmukh was very early. You know, none of us really had.
Actually, no one's really discovered that.
Nobody's discovered that. I feel like it should have been way darker, and then it would have been way funnier.
Right.
You know,
Right.
if we had really made it like a kitschy, dark,
Correct.
lean into the blood and gore
Right.
kind of a thing.
Is that an itch you want to scratch? The whole I want to do a serious acting job.
I would like to.
Is it hard to convince people to give you that opportunity?
I think what's happened recently is filmmakers are coming to me and saying, I saw your stand-up,
Right.
and there was depth,
Yeah.
and there was stay,
Sure.
and there was silence in your stand-up.
Yeah.
So that's changed it a little bit. But man, would I love to do like a Holdovers,
Right.
kind of a movie. Look at Philip Seymour Hoffman
Yeah.
or Paul Giamatti or
Yeah.
Adam Sandler. These careers
Yeah.
in India, we're now discovering comedic leading men.
Right.
Earlier it was let's make leading man do comedy, and
Yeah.
that never quite worked because it wasn't his chops.
Yeah.
We're slowly getting there. I'm optimistic. I just got to look good, do push-ups, and it's around the corner, I hope.
Around the corner. Veer, you have a memoir coming out later this year.
I have a memoir. Yeah.
You've said it's about failure.
It's about failure.
Why and what can we expect?
So it's a very US thing where, American agents are like, all right, you won the Emmy, now write the memoir. And I was like, I'm halfway through this shit. I don't want to write about this nonsense. So the book is called The Outsider. And I feel like at every cool party, there is one person in the corner of the party like, what the fuck am I doing at this party? Who invited me? Should I not say something? Will I say something uncool and fuck it up? Look at these beautiful people. My God, should I ask for a selfie? Should I not ask for a selfie? And my whole career is being invited to cool parties that I never thought I would get invited to.
Sure.
I'm 5'8" and from Noida. Honestly, but then to be in a movie that Amir Khan produces, or to be at Carnegie Hall, or to be at Sydney Opera, or
Hosting the Emmys.
hosting the Emmys, you're just kind of going, how the fuck did I get here? And I think that's a broader feeling than winning.
Right.
If you want to learn about winning, there are enough alpha male podcasts that you can go to right now, like wake up at 4 a.m. and shove ice up your ass, or whatever the hell is, you can, there's enough of that. But if you're a loser, my book is for you.
What was winning the Emmy and then hosting the Emmys the next year? How did that change things, if it did?
Hosting was very tough.
Yeah.
Winning is damn easy. It's, because winning you don't even remember. Like somebody puts a camera over here, and they're like, and now the nominees are, etc., etc., and then you're just like, I've smiled too long. So, you're like, am I looking stupid? Then they say your name, and you never knew how to get to stage, but somehow you have made it up.
Yeah.
It's much heavier than you think it's going to be. I don't remember what I said. You walk out, and I have a manager called Reg, who's very nice, and Akash is also here today. And there was a dishwashing station. We were walking through the kitchen to get to the media center, and there was dishes. And my manager was like, stop. You used to be a dishwasher.
Right.
Take a picture.
Yeah.
So just to mark that, there's a nice picture of me next to dirty dishes with an Emmy award. And then I thought I forgot Netflix and my wife. And in that order, because my wife didn't pay for this special, Netflix did. So then I panicked and I was like, did I forget Netflix and did I forget Shivani? And the PR girl from Netflix was crying. You know what I mean? She's like, I don't know, but I'm so happy for you. And I'm like, lady, it's your job. Hosting the Emmys was very hard because it is a Western room.
Right.
So it's 2,000 very powerful people
Right.
from the West. And I think there is a version of an Indian that they are willing to accept and a version of an Indian that they are not willing to accept. I think you, the diaspora, can probably relate to this, where you walk around with this voice in the back of your head that your parents have trained you with. If you're from India and you've come here, which is behave yourself. Don't speak up too much. Don't be audacious. Keep your head down. Quietly prosper. Am I wrong? Right? So anytime an Indian is too audacious or a little bit bold, it's new for them too.
Right.
So my first joke, I knew that if it goes well, we'll be okay. But if it dies, we're screwed. It's going to be tough. Because the first joke was, I have an Indian accent, and if you don't understand, just go to work and ask your boss. And if your boss isn't Indian, your boss's boss.
Right.
And we did it, heart beating in chest, and you saw like 2,000 white people just kind of go, all right, I guess it's that kind of show, you know. And then it was easy from there. But that first joke was very tough because usually we can be a little pandering
Yes.
when we go across, you know, and that was new for them too.
Right. What's it like to live with a comic? I mean, I know this question should be to Shivani, but what's it like? What do you like? What do you like to live with?
What am I like to live with? Must be hard, no, Shivani, to travel the world in nice hotels and have people be excited to see your husband and all of that. No, I'm kidding. It's terrible, to be honest, to live with me. I belong to other people as much as I belong to her. And that's not in a fanciful kind of a film star way.
Yeah, sure.
I literally belong to other people. They're in the room with me.
Right.
You know, so if I have 102 fever, or if our dog is sick, or if we have a personal crisis, 5,000 tickets are sold and you got to go.
Right.
You know, so that's tough. I'm perpetually jet lagged. I'm deeply sad. I struggle with moments of extreme laughter and extreme sadness. And both of them feed my material. And also, sometimes when you observe the world a lot, you tend not to be present in that world. You know, so imagine that you're at a party with a guy who all he wants to do is sit back and kind of look at the party, but he's not at the party with you.
Yeah.
So that must be a very tough experience, I would imagine, to be with someone who's constantly in their head.
Right.
So I don't think it's easy at all, but we do 2 or 3 things that really work for us. We took this decision 5 or 6 years ago. We're like, fuck it. We're not gonna collect things, but we're gonna live well.
Nice.
So we travel the world, but we're like, we're not shopping, we're not buying things, not going to be fancy,
Right.
but we're flying first class, we're going to get a suite, we're going to eat in the best restaurant in town,
Nice.
and music and experiences we'll spend any money on,
Nice.
and get front row seats.
Lovely.
So that's our life
Nice.
right now, where we just experience stuff together. Everything we get, we give one away. That's the rule in my house. So if you get a bag, you give a bag away. If you buy shoes, you give shoes away.
Nice.
And we've kind of got a lot of good karma from the universe because of it. So I don't know. You know, you'd have to ask her, but I think it's a good balance of good and bad.
Okay. You know, you said, great way to live actually. You said you're sad a lot.
I am.
And I have to ask that question because it is the cliche, it is the
It is,
stereotype.
very much so, yeah.
That the people that make people laugh are the ones that are sort of tortured inside. Does that come with the job? Is that sort of very personal to people in that place, or is it sort of just what comes with being on all the time, or expected to be on all the time, and expected to find new ways to make people laugh?
I think it's both. You know, I think it gets you into the job, and then the job doesn't help.
Right.
You know, in that, you know, why do people become comedians? It's rejection.
Yeah.
You know, either the coolest kid in school becomes a comic,
Yeah.
or the loser in school becomes a comic. The coolest kid in school, I feel like, has a shorter career than the loser in school. So you were probably bullied. You probably had a fair amount of rejection. You probably had a fair amount of shame growing up. And then that's fine. That's life. Everybody has their struggle. I'm never one to fetishize struggle. But then you spend 80% of your life alone.
Right.
That is the curse of being a comic.
Right.
You're across the world.
The road.
You work for 1 hour a day at night like a vampire.
Right.
And then you're just in your head, you know, all day long. So you don't see your friends. You don't see your... So that comes with struggles.
Right.
And you also deeply observe the world where other people have the luxury of escaping from it.
Right.
You know, and so deeply observing the world means deeply observing the sadness of the world also.
Right.
And I'm a very sensitive person. But compared to what a guy who's an engineer for 12 hours a day, I have the best life, you know. So a little bit of perspective in that, you know.
Right.
You know, Indian people, we love like uski struggle,
Correct,
uski kahani.
Yeah.
Fuck all that. You know,
Romantic, yeah.
life's really good.
Right.
And I'm not struggling with anything in mental health that I imagine anybody else in the audience. You don't look depressed, but I'm just. You know, there's that quote that everybody's going through something.
yeah.
Everybody's going through something.
Right.
You know, you're not special because of it.
Right. When you, I mean, do jokes come to you? Does a line come to you when you're at dinner and you see some? What is your process? Do you like pull out a paper napkin and write down?
No,
a joke?
but I dream and then I write.
Okay.
So I wake up in the morning and I have a tiny room that I've rented, which is 5 minutes away from my house,
Okay.
which is my creative space. So I wake up in the morning, I say good morning to my wife, and I'm saying without susu, potty, brush teeth, I leave the house.
Wow.
And I walk 5 minutes to this room and I just write,
Right.
you know, and that will take me from 6 to 8:30.
Okay.
That's my peak creative time. And then that will become lines and jokes and I'll run it at the club that night. But I need to leave immediately in the morning
Right.
because 90% of things I write I've dreamt during the night.
Do you watch other stand-up to inspire you to know what? No.
No, if you work at McDonald's, you don't eat burgers. You know what I mean? And I can see it coming,
Right.
much like they can see it coming.
Right.
Like comedians, if you ever see a comedian bombing, or like something didn't work, and in the back you just hear, ha ha ha, that's a comic. You know, because we laugh at shit that surprises us.
Right.
You know, like at the night, 2 nights ago, Sapan Verma. Was anybody at the awards night? Right? So Sapan hosted the awards. Very good job.
Yeah.
I did a damn good job. But at some point, some alpha dude was like screaming, Jaideep, "Hey, Jaideep," some shit was happening. And Sapan was like, it's okay. Like, that dude's going to be fine.
Right.
He's had a beer or whatever. Sapan said something. And like, to me, that shit is funny.
Right.
And comics will laugh at that.
Right.
You know, so, but no, we don't watch stand-up that much.
So how do you know what? I don't know if it's the right question. How do you know what the competition is doing, or maybe you don't see them as competition, or just what's going on in the world, sort of?
If it's really good, it'll find its way to you.
Right.
You know, like I remember watching Zakir show, Tathatsu, right? Tathastu, and it was so good. You have to watch it to check up on what's happening. Bo Burnham's Inside is a Netflix special that is fantastic. It's so good it pisses you off, right? Half of the structure of my new Netflix special was because I saw Bo Burnham's Inside, and I'm like, why can't I make a special that feels like a movie?
Right.
And why can't I edit it where it feels like future, past, timelines, etc.? There is competition, but it's a healthy competition. You know, the nice thing in India is, man, 1.5 billion people across the world. There's enough audience for me, Zakir, Upmanyu, Kenny, all of us can succeed.
Yeah.
Sometimes as opposed to abroad, where there's only space for 5 Indian comics to succeed,
Right.
or 4 Indian comics to succeed. So, but like I remember, Zakir and I will meet, and I'm like, all right, I'm doing the Apollo, you're doing Royal Albert,
Right.
you're doing something, I'm doing Carnegie.
Right.
I'll keep pushing you, you keep pushing me, and we'll keep pushing this thing up together, man.
Is that when you've done everything that you've done, what sort of, how do you sort of move the goalpost? How do you decide, are you taking it a day at a time, literally, or is there a plan?
I have goals for sure. I've just found my feet as a director.
Yeah.
It's something that I want to do. I feel like I have been underutilized as an actor.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is more in me in terms of performance, and I would love to put it out there. There are 2 or 3 iconic venues in the world where you've never seen an Indian person. And I hope you've never seen an Indian person on the West End,
Right.
right? Or on Broadway.
Right.
You've never seen an Indian person in certain venues in India. I definitely intend to do that. And
So the live theatre sort of excites you, yeah?
for sure. but if it works out or not, who knows?
Going for the EGOT, aren't you?
I'd love to win a Tony Award. I'd love to win a Golden Globe too. I didn't think an Emmy was in my life. So why the hell not give it a shot here?
Right. Yeah.
Could work out.
Oh.
Stranger things have happened.
Veer, I don't know if you remember, but it was many years ago. We shared a makeup room together. We used to share. We were at TV18.
Yes.
And used to do. I think it was a segment in a.
All news on the loose. Yeah.
That's right. And I think once a week we were in that room together.
Yeah.
And I remember you being like crazy funny.
Yeah.
Did you know then what the grand plan was, or has it sort of come to be?
It's come to be. For context, I used to do a show on CNBC, 2.5 minutes, on the primetime bulletin called Imagine a World in which at 9 p.m. at night,
Yeah.
a 26-year-old comedian could go on primetime news and make fun of the Prime Minister of India. You guys missed out. I'm just saying, it was a crazy world.
It was.
Again, a party where you're like, how cool is this to be here? But I've had moments that change. Like,
Right.
I remember I was working at CNBC, and then I saw Rang De Basanti.
Right.
And I quit my job a week later.
Oh wow.
Because I saw Rang De Basanti, and I remember specifically looking at Sharman
Yeah.
and looking at Siddharth, and just being like, my God, look at how they shared space with this massive star.
Yeah.
And, I went to drama school. I know how to act. I'm like, maybe there's a space
Right.
for me in this industry if, and by no means do I mean to compare my talent to them, but I was like, look how well they shared space.
Right.
A truly ensemble movie. I quit my job a week later to try and make it into movies. So I've had these moments that I'm very impulsive that way. I just kind of jump.
Right. Who are the comics in India, back home in India, that whose work you've watched and enjoyed?
I like Sumukhi Suresh.
Yeah.
Very good, powerful voice.
Yeah.
I like Aditi Mittal.
Yeah.
Beast of a comic. Solid bite of a comic. You know what I mean? Just very vicious when she needs to be. Uruj Ashfaq is very authentic and herself. Neeti Palta out of Delhi is a great, just appeals to male and female audiences equally. And I kind of only want to mention female comics because the media doesn't enough.
My next question was going to be, there was a time when it was just sort of assumed and accepted for the longest time that women aren't funny, and I think that was true even of cinema for a long time. That and this is despite having someone like a Sridevi
Yeah.
in Bollywood and having Streisand in Hollywood. One sees actually in stand-up a lot more sort of women out there. Is it a more democratic sort of world?
Not yet enough, and I can't speak to their experience, but I do think 5 years from now, 4 years from now, you will see just a wave of female voices because of what's happening in male comedy right now. So I think, and not India specific, but you can speak to it. I think across the world you're seeing this kind of dude bro, edgelord,
Right.
trans people, you can't cancel me, comedian, and I think that wave of pseudo-masculinity has kind of peaked. And the pendulum, it was a pendulum swing for very woke pandering comedy to swing the other way. And I think it'll swing back, and to counter that, I think you'll see very nuanced comedy. And I think a lot of the nuanced comedy is coming from female voices.
Right.
So yeah.
Wait, do you feel you have any responsibility other than to your audience as a comic?
Yeah, I think so. I have a responsibility to younger comics. So if I'm ever asked for help or money or legal advice, etc., it's a thing. I'm a phone call away. I hope if I'm the first Indian to set foot in a venue, I'm not the last Indian to set foot in that venue. And these are not easy doors to,
Yeah.
to break down, and not easy for the venue either. Like, can I tell you a story about, so we did Carnegie Hall. Now, Carnegie Hall, only 2 Indians have played before me, I think. Zakir Hussain and Aman and Ayan Ali Bangash have played. So it's classical musicians and it's revered, and we were like, can we change the lights a little bit? And they were like, no, we are Carnegie Hall. We were like, can we change the set a little bit? And they were like, no, we are Carnegie Hall. And you can't book Carnegie Hall. They book you.
Okay.
So they really have to believe that you have the critical momentum, etc. So they were like, so we'll start at 8 p.m. And I was like, see, you are Carnegie Hall, but there are 2,000 Indians coming tonight, along with the 2,000 Americans. You will not start at 8 p.m. And they were like, no, we are Carnegie Hall. We will start at 8 p.m. And I was like, chalo, we'll see. At 7:55, the lady from Carnegie Hall came back and she's like, we'll start at 8:15 because only the Americans are here. So maybe the next Indian who plays Carnegie Hall gets to start at 8:15. That's all I'm saying. And I had a little bit to do with that.
I know I've asked you this question before, and I feel like I'm sort of pressurizing you to give an answer. But do you believe, and don't say yes because I seem determined to, do you believe that comedy can change the world? Do you believe that comedy can change things? I have this sort of naive notion that words and art can change the world. Do you feel like comedy has the power?
I think it would be very dangerous for me to believe that, because my career would end 2 years after. Because to have anybody believe the hype of of their career is very dangerous. I do think words can change the world. I do think a Dylan song, if you just read it for what it is, can change the world. I think George Carlin, there's a comedian called George Carlin, is quoted by the left and the right as their voice. And he's been dead for so long, he's still relevant. I think maybe comedy can change one person's world.
Sure.
If they're having a bad day that day, or if they weren't able to process something that was going on in the world, seeing that somebody else isn't able to process it either,
Right.
leads to a collective experience.
Sure.
So I don't think you can teach them how to process it.
Right.
I think you can just say, yo, I'm confused too,
Right.
and you're not alone. And I think comedy does that.
Lovely. I've been told that I shouldn't hog the questions, so if you have questions, just raise your hand and we will take some questions for Thir.
Sure.
There's lots. Okay. Can we pass the mic around? You can take mine.
Mike will go to whoever can keep their hands raised the longest. No, I'm kidding. It's all Heil Hitlers in the room. It's great.
Okay, yeah.
All right, cool.
Hi, Veer.
Hi.
I'm Rusbe. I'm here from New Zealand.
Yes.
Firstly-
Thank you, but I'm from Mumbai and it's much further away. So,
Yeah, I'm originally from Nasik.
oh, lovely.
Close to
But
it.
I'm still from Mumbai, and you took a 2-hour flight, and मेरा बहुत time लगा यार ऐसा पहुंचने में.
मेरे को हर 2 साल में लगता है बहुत टाइम जाने के लिए.
Why are we competing? What is this weird energy in the room right now?
I just want to say I loved your Hasmukh.
Thank you.
It was really good. You're a powerful actor and an inspiration. And one thing that I really liked about you is you have an Indian voice and you're proud of that voice. And that really gives me motivation to be outside in a white country and, have that voice and have that attitude. So thank you for that. My question is, a lot of stand-up comics, first, initially it was going into acting and movies, and now it's into podcasting. What's your take on podcasting? Would you consider to have your own podcast, or do you think that diminishes your stand-up value?
Bro, no. Do we need another comedian podcast? Really, like, what would I say that you've got Financial Bro podcast, you've got Alpha Male podcast, you've got Feminist Bro shitting on Alpha Male podcast, you've got Gen Z Girls Gossiping podcast, Obama has a podcast. I can't do it. And also I do think it will feed into my stand-up, and then you'll feel like you've seen my stand-up already. You know, I want you to come into the show not knowing what to expect, not knowing if I will turn the lights off, not knowing if I will experiment with the audience, not knowing if I will make you uncomfortable. And I feel like a podcast kind of gives it away. It sells tickets, you know, and one is selling tickets. So if you ever see me doing a podcast, it means the tickets aren't selling anymore, and that's just your cue to show up. But no, I really want to make a movie with that time, so I'd rather do that.
First thing, Veer, I really love you, and I got into the wrong location. Apple Maps showed me some other building, so I was sitting.
Why do all of you complain about your travel in this country? What is wrong with you guys? Do you know how long it takes to fucking get here?
Yeah, I'm actually from Bangalore, so yeah, and that's.
Zero sympathy. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, okay. Veer, I actually saw your YouTube channel, and in that you said that the young generation should not idealize big stars, politicians. And one thing is, when I grew up, I was idolizing Shah Rukh Khan,
yes.
or, you know, Amir Khan, and some people, you know, but the way they looked, you know, we want to, like one day I want to have that big house, that big bangla,
Great.
you know, all those things. And then now when you say, like suddenly now we don't have anyone to idolize, because if I look at if my idealize, like people who I idealize it, like Barack Obama and those type of people who are the folks who you mentioned who not to idealize. So according to you, who should we idolize? Because every young person needs someone to, you know, look up to, and that's why I just wanted to know who should be our idols and who should society follow.
Well, I think it's a very good question. Well, firstly, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
22.
22. So then you need to stop idolizing yourself first. Your generation, you know, you killed fame, and thank you for doing it, because, you know, there was this notion that fame goes to special people, God's chosen, etc., etc. And then Instagram showed up, and TikTok showed up, and you became the main character. Right, so now all of a sudden you're like, oh, Brad Pitt doesn't deserve the cool filter and the lighting, etc., etc. I do, and I get the cool music around my story. Then you went too far and you began performing your own lives instead of living your own lives. So I don't think you should idolize a person. I think you should idolize qualities. So, okay, let me give you an example. You said two names, Shah Rukh Khan. The best quality about Shah Rukh Khan is whoever he's talking to, he makes them feel like they are the only person in the world. They're the only person in the room. Which is why if you see any Shah Rukh Khan story, everybody will say exactly the same thing. He made me feel warm, he made me feel welcome. That's something to idolize. If you're idolizing Barack Obama, you can idolize public speaking. Barack Obama won the election with one 7-minute speech, where he was the last speaker at the Democratic National Convention. He spoke for 7 minutes, and people were like, this is the next president of America. 7 minutes changed his life. So I think you can find one thing in every human being to say, this is what I like about them. But liking them means accepting that they are a mix, and good days and bad days, etc. So I often feel like you don't dig deep on the person, because we're like, what went viral about that person? And then this is that person. Really get into their stories, man. People have really cool stories. So idolize their story, perhaps. Sorry, that's a long-winded answer, but yeah. Yes, ma'am. Where are you from? I'm from Mumbai. Now, where have you come from?
I'm from Punjab.
That's great. Okay, cool. You come from Punjab for this?
No.
Okay, great.
I live
'Cause-
here, but yeah.
Okay.
I just have to tell you, this is literally answered prayer. I mean, I've been manifesting this moment since I saw you at Hammer Hall. And I don't know if you remember, I was the girl who cried and couldn't speak to you, but you were like, do you want to get a photo? And I was like, yeah, sure.
Hey.
So I've been like DMing you like crazy since that.
Listen, I want you to turn around. You see that woman there in the blue? That's my wife. And now there are two women in this room who I have made cry. Both of you have that in common. Anyway.
But yeah, I wrote you a letter, and so, since you didn't respond to my DM, so I'll just give it to you.
I'll come and get it for you. I'll give you a hug as well. Come on. Don't cry, all right? God bless you. God bless you. All right, I'll read it, I promise. All right?
Please do
It'll
it.
take me time, I'm dyslexic, but I'll read it
I
fully.
know. I actually Googled it, but it wasn't helpful at all. I was like, how do dyslexic people read? And it was like, some can read in
I mean, we're not illiterate, we're just dyslexic. It just takes time.
Yeah, I would love if you could tell me if I'm funny after reading the letter. I mean, it's
I will
funny.
read it.
Don't take a lot of parts of it like seriously, but some of them very seriously. So yeah,
I'm so stressed right now. Like,
no more than me.
like I will read it. I promise you. I appreciate you, and you're very brave.
Please
And
respond to my DM.
I enjoy you. Thank you.
I have one question. I'm
Okay,
so sorry.
cool.
So it's just that where I work, there was this person. He's Italian. He told me so I couldn't do a normal calculation because I'm very bad in math.
Okay.
So he was like, and then so I was like, let me just get my calculator out, and he was like, well, that's strange. You're from India, right? I was like, yeah. So you're very bad in math, but you're very good in English. And I don't know, was that racist? And I didn't have to like come back to that. And my man was like, Veer Das would know what to say. So, what would you? I'm sorry if I'm putting you on spot, but I just what do you say to someone who just? I mean,
I think.
don't even-
Where's this person from?
He's from Italy. What I thought it was, I was like, well, I don't see pizza in your hand, but I'm not judging. But like,
He's from Italy or from
Yeah.
England? Okay, so
Italy.
I think you don't say anything.
yeah, I could not.
Take
My
revenge.
voice would-
All right. Look, what is the joy of being in the diaspora? Is you can. There's so many things that the white people do not know. Right? You can go to him next week and be like, I want 2 weeks off. And he can be like, why? And you can be like, it's the festival of Bakchodi. What the fuck does he know, right? And he can be like, oh my God, I had no idea about the Bakchodi. Please, I respect your Bakchodi. Enjoy your Bakchodi. Right? So, do that shit. Darling, don't get mad. Get even. All right? Okay, now you got to give the mic to somebody else. 'cause-
Thank you.
all right.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm really nervous and excited, so I had to write it down.
Okay.
And please don't hate me for this, but I don't have any deep questions. We love you for the magic that you create, and you mentioned your wife and Kavi and Akash. So can I please request they come on stage? I believe that the people that enable you to create that magic are the real heroes.
Okay.
So we just want to see them be on stage and give them a round of applause.
Okay, so I'm going to tell you what's going to happen right now. There is 0% chance that my wife is going to come on stage. I've known her for a very long time, but there is more probability of a Modi press conference than my wife coming on stage. It's not going to happen, but she's right over there, and you can give her a round of applause. There's Shivani right there. Akash, raise your hands. Akash is right there. Kavi, where you at? Last row up there, Kavi Shastri. Please give them a round of applause. You're very kind. Thank you.
The gentleman there at the back.
Hi, thank you so much. Veer, I just appreciate a lot when you take stands, and I'm going to take your attention on same-sex love that you advocated for so long. Just to give you context, I made a documentary called Queering India, documenting India, how it's changed from 2018 decriminalization till now in 3 Indian languages, and you would be surprised in how Indians are thinking about it. It looks like India is ready, but government isn't. So I'm just trying to understand. I tried to get people from India to support this, but we get more support from West rather than India. Even those actors who play queer characters and earn money are not ready to, maybe because of the government, whatever. But just to understand, what do you see the future of it? Because it looks like there is a lot of support from West, but it's just not happening in India, and Indians are just too, I don't know if scared is the right word to use, to stand up for, human rights.
Okay. I want to preface this answer by saying that anything that I respond to is from passive observation, not lived experience. So I will probably get it wrong. You know, I cannot speak to the lived experience of being queer in India and what that struggle is. All right. What I can tell you is 2 things truthfully. Expecting support from the entertainment industry around a cause is a high expectation that they will never meet adequately. And I think you should accept that, all right? Not just you specifically. They're in their own place, and they speak up about the 5 things that they can, and no judgment to them, but I don't think that's an expectation you should have. I do think when it comes to the government, or when it comes to our families, which is again the first protest point, right, is within our families. We're young, yeah. You just got to give it time. You know, we're actively a very young country, and we're kind of leaning into our voice and our freedoms for the first time. So I hope this isn't a conversation in 5-6 years from now, you know, and that queer love is just love, you know, and that same-sex marriage is just marriage. I don't know if it'll be 5 years. I don't know how it'll change in my lifetime. But having said that also, I'm wary of support from the West, you know, because I feel like that's always fleeting, and it's always basis where we are in a geopolitical ladder, you know. So I think support from one Indian is worth more than support from 20 people sitting across 7 different continents. So what I'd advise anybody is to really cherish the support from that one Indian they can get, because that one Indian leads to 2 Indians.
And therefore, I would love to show you the trailer sometime.
I would love to see it.
Yeah,
I'd be honored to see it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
The gentleman here in the second row.
Thank you. So a big part of your comedy is talking about different aspects of your identity and about being Indian. And so I'm curious how much of that influence comes from the fact that you grew up outside of India, you spent a lot of time outside of India. I think you also studied outside of India. So I'm just curious, because if you grew up in Mumbai and you live in Mumbai all your life, then maybe you don't have that perspective about like how chaotic and crazy Mumbai is. And if so I'm just curious about like how that influences your comedy.
Well, I think, you know, my perspective is an Indian voice, but it's very much a perspective of being an Indian in the world. You know, so yes, I was when I was 1 year old, I went to Africa, but from the age of 8, I was in boarding school in Simla 8 months a year, 9 months a year. Then Delhi University, you know, DPS Noida from class 8 to class 12. Then America for 3 years, then back. So I am an Indian in the world, and so that does somehow give me an outsider perspective on India and on the world sometimes. It is not something I have come to terms with easily. To give you context, it's taken me a long time to be like, I guess this is who I am. And I kind of have to do me, and I'll never be able to speak 100% to a place. You know, sometimes you'll see a comic and they're like, Bareilly, and they've done a bit on Bareilly, and they have captured Bareilly's essence beautifully. I may never be able to do that fully, right? But perhaps my perspective will show you how an Indian feels when they are lost, how an Indian feels when they are traveling, and how an Indian feels when they deeply crave acceptance from India. I think maybe that's my perspective.
I'm told we have time for just one question. I think the lady in the black here.
Thank you. I'll keep it short. Veer, first of all, huge fan. I'm so glad I'm doing this. And also, I wanted to say I thought you handled the Two Indias controversy with great integrity, which a lot of people perhaps lack the strength or the perspective to do, and I was very admiring of that. I'm curious from here on, and obviously there's no telling what will get people offended or what will go viral or whatever, but I'm just wondering from that experience, if something happens again, would you do something differently the next time?
I'm pretty sure it's going to happen again. And I don't say that with bravado. I just say that because I'm pretty sure it's going to happen again. And I hope I will be able to write as good jokes about it. I hope I will take it less personally than last time, but allow it to light an equal fire in me. And I hope when it happens again, it will be for material that is better. You know, so I would be fine with you getting pissed off at me again. I just hope it's for a better quality joke than it was last time, because at least that means that I grew from the last time you were pissed off at me. Yeah.
Thank you, Veer. This was lovely. Always such a thoughtful speaker. I think I speak for everyone when I say more power to you. Can't wait to see what you do next. Continue to make us proud.
Thank you so much. Give it up for Rajiv as well.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.